You are listening to another episode of the Game Informer Show. I am your host, Andrew Reiner. Yes, this is Reiner sitting in for Matt Helgeson, who,
you are,
for the first time, is in the hot seat. He's going to be leading us through our LA Noire charge here.
Yeah, Reiner, you get your big break.
Matt, you have quite a different opinion than most of the people who have voices on the internet. A lot of people gave it 10s and 9s. You were in the 8 range.
Yeah, it got kind of a really odd range of reviews. I mean, I think there was a couple people that were even more negative than me. I think Wired and Eurogamer, but yeah, like a bunch of people. I think it was the Guardian UK, the daily newspaper in the UK, basically made it sound like one of the greatest accomplishments of all of human history, essentially.
And we have 2 other voices here who probably differ from yours as well. Matt Miller.
Hey, guys.
And Matt Burtz.
Burn the witch.
All Matts.
This is the Matt show today.
So obviously, Matt, let's start with you and just we just talked about The Guardian, loving it. What were your thoughts on it?
It was an interesting game and kind of a difficult game for me to review. It was actually one of the most difficult reviews I've written in quite a while because I feel like it's a game that sort of really set its own course. You can draw some parallels between other Rockstar games and the fact that it is set in an open world. They did a great job of recreating, 1947 Los Angeles. That being said, it's a much more linear game than you expect. It's not Grand Theft Auto. It's not Red Dead Redemption set in the 40s. It's a very cinematic game, perhaps to a fault. Like it goes along a very set story path. You can drive through the city, but there's not really much to do there. So I think to me, the heart of the game really is the conversations and the interrogations that you have with the suspects and the witnesses while you're solving these cases as Cole Phelps. And I think how people react to that is probably going to be based on how compelling that portion of the game was. I know you guys are obviously all here because you've played it as well. I had some pacing issues at times. I felt like it got a little dull. Parts I was really compelled, and I think the storytelling is amazing. The graphics and the facial animations are absolutely out of this world. I think it looks amazing. There was times I felt myself drifting a bit, but I guess the story was always enough to pull me back. And ultimately, I found it a very memorable game and a good game, but maybe not the perfect, 10 out of 10 that people expect from Rockstar.
Yeah, one of the things that, through the years, Rockstar has kind of become known as the company that makes these open world games, these giant epics in these sandboxes. And now they're kind of starting to take on a new identity of being more of period pieces in that same kind of context.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the driving force for me is, exploring this early version of LA and, just seeing how people lived and how the society works and all that stuff. I think they did a really great job of setting that up and making that portion of the game work.
Yeah.
I'm still early in the game. I don't know how far along you guys are. Miller, where are you at?
I'm about a third of the way in, and I actually agree with kind of both the things you're saying. I think that seeing LA in its current, in the kind of antiquated way that we get to see it here is very reminiscent of what I like about watching the show Mad Men. Obviously, it's a little bit different time period, but it has that same quality where you can tell there's a level of historical authenticity to even to the way that words are said and sentences are structured by the characters who speak them. That's really exciting. And I also agree with you, Matt, that the interrogations really end up being kind of the heart of the game. It's actually in that component of the game that I find myself most enjoying the game and most being frustrated by the game.
Definitely. I'd agree with that.
I mean, it's got it's so cool to sit there and be able to look up from your notebook and see this guy across the table from you as he sort of fidgets around and realize oh man, that dude is totally lying, right?
Yeah.
And it's an experience in a game that I've never had before, and for that I give it mad props. But the thing about it that's kind of bugging me right now is the level to which everything it's not just linearity along the story path, it's the linearity in those conversations themselves that really kind of annoys me. I sometimes get to the beginning of a case and a few minutes in, for instance, I'll know what happened, I'll have figured it out, right? But I can't find any way to communicate that in my conversations and in these investigations, I have to find this one weird clue that the game is expecting me to input before I can progress the story. And if I don't, then I don't get that experience. And it's this. And as we've talked about in the office, I mean, the game keeps moving forward regardless, which is probably good. But it is kind of frustrating when I feel like I totally figured this out and I've paid really close attention, but I didn't happen to select the one clue that they thought I was going to.
Yeah, it's interesting that the alchemy there is no alchemy to the interrogation, so to speak. There is just, you get the questions that are prepared for you, and then you have to do kind of the Larry David stare test, where you kind of stare the guy down and wait to see if there's anything weird, as opposed to letting me take my evidence and form my own line of questioning, which I feel sometimes it just, when it doesn't let you do that, it's really frustrating because, like Miller said, I've connected these dots and I want to start from here because I already have this guy incriminated in these ways. So I want to lead my questioning to find out what else I need to find out.
Right. See, it's been a much different experience for me because I'm learning I'm one of the worst detectives in the world. Like, I don't gather enough evidence, and it basically, when I question someone, it's like we're talking about the weather because I know nothing about what's going on. I just make the mistake of going to them too soon. I don't explore like the backyard or go outside or anything like that.
Well, that's the other thing, that they give you multiple locations to do something at, and then, for instance, there's this one case, I had 2 left, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this one first. And that triggered this whole sequence of events that ended the case, and I didn't even get to the other place. So they don't do a really good job of like leading you down the path to the point where there's the big moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can jump the gun a little bit, unbeknownst to the player.
I touched on something Miller said. One of the things I talked about in my review is in comparison to Heavy Rain and Mass Effect, and I just kind of bring those 2 games up because I thought they were 2 games where conversations played a very key role in the gameplay experience, maybe the primary role. It does bother me a little bit that as much as I think I might like the interrogations more than you guys did, but I wish it impacted the larger story. And the larger story is really good, and you guys haven't finished the game, but I think one of the things that sort of cemented it as a really positive experience for me was the ending. I thought it all tied together very nicely in a way that you guys have probably seen some of the flashbacks in some of the newspapers, which sort of tell this story of this kind of
it's
weird,
really cool,
creepy psychiatrist guy.
Yeah, right.
But when you're kind of in the early stages, you're like, well, there's all these threads sort of just floating out there, and it actually does sort of all tie everything together in a pretty cool way.
But in doing that, it's a fixed path.
Exactly. So, if I screw up a case or I do well on a case, like you said, I might have been able to see more of a case. Ultimately, it doesn't really have a lasting impact on the game. And that was one of the things that I thought brought it down somewhat for me.
I think in terms of like what is exciting about the game, the 2 games you brought up, in a weird way, even though they're in a lot of ways so different, those 2 games, Mass Effect and Heavy Rain, are really interesting games to compare this one against, because both of those, among other things, were triumphs of interactive storytelling, and they had any number of other problems potentially, but you always felt like there was this sense of like the decisions I make matter. And if there's one thing I would point to in a genre that has so little in it so far of this kind of interactive fiction, there's one thing that LA Noire doesn't do well. It's that it doesn't give you that sense of like what I do matters. But all of that has to be balanced against what we were talking about at the beginning, which is that there are experiences in this game and visuals in this game and acting and music and settings that you've just never seen before. Yeah. And it's worth a play regardless, just for those things.
Yeah, I like these historical pieces. And this game actually reminds me less of Grand Theft Auto and of Red Dead Redemption than it does Mafia 2 and The Getaway. I feel like it's way more in common with Team Bondi, which was Team Soho's first game. Because the world, it's gorgeous to look at, but it feels a little empty to me. You have like 40 side missions you can do. You can go find a couple cars, and you can go to drive to find landmarks, but that's kind of it in terms of exploring the world.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you accept that at face value, like I think you had to do for Mafia 2, and you don't weigh too negatively against that, I think there's a rich experience to be had just in being in that world.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the things I've noticed is I don't really feel like I know my character very well. They do these flashbacks to when he's in the military, and that's kind of the flesh you get on that character, but you don't really know who he is in this world at this time. There really isn't a lot of interaction with characters he knows or anything outside of the people he works with and the cases he takes on.
Well, I think that hits on kind of a weird difference between game storytelling and movie storytelling, right? Like in a movie, that kind of main character might be really compelling because, it's about the journey of discovery. But when you're playing a character and you are controlling his actions, there does need to be, I think, a little bit more ownership of like what that character is about. To go back to the Mass Effect thing, Shepard can be any number of different characters the way that you play him or her. But even from the beginning, you always get this sense of like, what he or she is like. Right. And I don't know. I agree with you, Renner. I don't know that you totally get that with Cole, but you do get that kind of movie-like experience of having a character unfold slowly as the game continues.
Yeah, it was one of the things I noticed in Red Dead. I played that game for like 50 hours, and then I finally saw what his life was really like outside of all the stuff he did, and I thought that was such a brilliant moment in that game. And then we brought up Mafia. Both Mafia 1 and 2 did a really great job of letting you know who your character was before you did anything. It feels like this game really needed that at the beginning. Like I just kind of got thrown in, and the first thing I was doing, I was picking up bottles. I must have picked up like 15 different bottles.
Bottles and hairbrushes.
Yeah, and cigarettes.
Yeah, a lot of matchbooks.
I would say I think that Cole and everything that's going on with the story gets a lot more compelling in the second half to the second third, particularly the second third. There's also another character that comes into it that you guys haven't really experienced yet.
I'm about halfway through. I'm on mission 10 now. So
what desk are you?
I'm homicide.
Okay, homicide. Then you'll go to Vice next, I believe. Or
Yep.
You haven't been Vice.
No, Vice and Arson are next after that.
Yeah, once you get on Vice, I think some of the larger, without giving too much away, the LA Police Department isn't necessarily the most squeaky clean organization in the history of the world. And some of that stuff starts to come into play in the Vice desk a little bit more. And I thought the story, for me, got better as the game went on. Is one of the reasons I gave it as high of a score as it did, because ultimately I had my problems with it, but, I really like the interrogations. I'll remember a lot of those, I think. I think I'll remember Cole as a character and the things that happened to him. And when they kind of... I think Reiner's right. It does tend to drift a little at the beginning because they're sort of like weaving these three separate threads, and you don't really know. And honestly, you don't really start to figure that out until like 10 hours, go by at least before they really start to kind of integrate all that stuff. But the way it turned out, I was pretty happy with. And yeah, I mean, there is, like you guys said, there's a lot to be said for the vibe of it and how, I don't know, that time period in the setting and all that, and they really, Rockstar, and Team Bondi as well, they do such a good job of just capturing something other than just like, hey, it's Space Marines, or
Yeah.
You're one of the last humans that survived the infection of the others that has decimated New York City, and it's like, that stuff's cool and Crisis and whatever, but it is cool to play like an actual human being in an actual just real world stuff that you just don't. It's weird. Like you experience like alien worlds in video games way more than you experience just like the real world, you know. And
Right.
so it's almost like a novelty.
Yeah, it's like Arkham Asylum, BioShock, and then all those Rockstar games. You really feel like you're in that world. Whereas as much as I love the Mass Effect games, when I go to a planet, I know it's just a little path I'm going to be on. I don't really feel like I'm a part of this giant universe necessarily. And I think that's something where most developers could get a lot better is developing these worlds like Rockstar does and these settings and making you feel like you're a part of it. That's something that...
Do you hear that, publishers? Let everybody take 5 years to 7 years to make a game.
Yeah, exactly. And give them, $200 million to do it. How did you guys... we talked about the interrogations. How did you guys feel about... There's not a lot of action. I thought it could have used a little more. How do you guys feel about that part of the game?
Well, the action's all tucked in the side quests pretty much, I think.
Yeah.
I
A lot
mean,
of
most of those involve gunplay or chasing down a guy or a car chase. So I think, I was thinking about that. Like, they could have introduced more of that to the missions, but I think you run the risk of making it a Dirty Harry game then.
Yeah.
Right.
They definitely were going for a different vibe than that.
I like the chases, how they have a lot of scripted moments, stuff falling or cars coming to a screeching halt right when you get to it. That stuff's cool.
I think it, in a lot of ways, it was probably a smart design decision, because I think that they were looking at the type of players that might be playing the game and realizing that there would be plenty of people who were completely happy with the interrogation stuff, the looking for clues thing, and just the occasional burst of action, and that they would have another group of players that were coming off of Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption and expecting something more in that vein, and they're not going to get it out of this game, but they are going to get a little bit, the option to do a little bit more of that kind of action stuff through side missions that you don't have to do.
Yeah, I would say there are a few, as the game goes on, a few more elaborate action sequences, and they actually worked pretty well, and I sort of wish there was a few more of those. Not many more, but there are a couple at the very end of the game, towards the end of Homicide, and something in Vice, where they do something a little more elaborate. One of my problems with the action is that I think they had the right amount of action, but I think there was too many of the, hey, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Oh, hey, yeah, sure, buddy. Let me just, whoa! And he, takes off. It's like, after a certain point, it's like, if one more of these guys bolts, I'm just going to, plug him right in the chest.
I plugged a couple guys when they ran.
Yeah, then you have to start
they
over.
don't like that.
Yeah.
It's game over.
Unless the guy shoots first, then it's okay.
Yeah, I just wish they could have, because I think, Rockstar in GTA and in Red Dead always has a pretty good variety of stuff, and I wish they would have had a little more in terms of maybe different setups, and I know they can't stretch it too into the absurd, but I thought when they did go out of their wheelhouse a little bit later in the game, those couple of times I really enjoyed those segments, and it really broke things up for me. And I would just maybe one or two more kind of set piece moments I think would have been really good. That said, I generally felt, I was generally compelled enough by the cases I was doing, because I would say for how many. When you think about how many cases are in this game, I mean, there's a ton of cases. What, 20?
21
cases, yeah.
I mean, that's 21 little mini stories, and I would say the vast majority of those stories are very cool.
And they're all based on real cases, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that I think most
give or
fudging
take,
and kind of hybridizing two different cases into one, or changing the ending of something that they saw in an old LA Times. But I mean, that's 21 little kind of mini stories with different characters, different actors, and I felt almost all of them were sort of compelling little arcs from start to finish, which is that's really hard to do. And at the same time, you're juggling three completely separate kind of storylines that go through the whole game at the same time. So I mean, when you think about what it takes to kind of plot all that stuff out while keeping track of the macro level story, I mean, it's quite an accomplishment, and that was I think people should take their hats off to Team Bondi for even attempting.
Yeah, and on top of that, this is the first game where acting is tied to gameplay. If these people are easily conveying they're lying or not, where's the fun in that? I think what I've seen so far, and me being as terrible as I am at the game, sometimes it's borderline. It's okay, maybe she's telling the truth, maybe not.
Yep.
Well, it's clear that to me the facial animation technology is absolutely, a step above, I think, Heavy Rain or Mass Effect or any other game. In terms of purely the facial expressions and believability, I mean, it's absolutely, if people can afford to do it, I think it's the way they should work. Or, I know the Heavy Rain guy says they're working on technology like that now, but it's...
And the Assassins guys, too, are doing something kind of similar as well.
I bought the characters as I mean, it's not out of the Uncanny Valley. It's very much in the Uncanny Valley, but I bought real emotion from them. And it's interesting as the game goes on and you're talking to, let's say, as the corruption kind of goes higher, you're talking to a lot more canny and maybe arrogant people, and they don't give you nearly as many... it's like when, you interview a bartender and he's he's scared that you're going to, pinch him for this, armed robbery he did when he was 19, and he's all nervous. But when you start to talk to guys that are more masterminding stuff, it gets kind of progressively harder to kind of read their faces, because they're, they're who the F are you? You know what I mean? And,
So you're saying save your intuition points?
yeah, I would. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. It's one of those games I was curious to ask you guys, just because I reviewed it and I assigned a score, I would. It's kind of hard without having seen the ending, especially in this game. But where would you guys fall in score if you had to score it right now? Because I could see. I wouldn't say anyone was wrong for scoring it anywhere from like a 7 to a 10, depending on how they personally felt about it.
Well, man, few games have that kind of immediate hook, and Rockstar does it every time. Like the second I set foot in Red Dead, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the LA Noire did the same thing for me. Right now, I'd say I'm probably in the 9 boat, probably a flat 9, right around there. Obviously, having some issues with how slow it is at times and just the lack of variety. Even in the early stages, I'm feeling that kind of pinch. But yeah, definitely in the 9 range, though.
I think for me, I feel super conflicted about the game at the point that I'm at, where there's my astonishment at the technical prowess that's on display in this game, and the excitement about getting to do something new in gameplay that I haven't done ever before in a game. And that's balanced against sometimes that I'm really genuinely frustrated at the way that the cases roll out, and feeling like I should be able to have a conversation go a different way than it ends up going, or saying something and then having my detective say something that means something totally different, and it surprises me. And so between those two extremes, I think I'd actually end up pretty close to where you were, Matt, if not maybe even a little lower, somewhere in the kind of 8.5, 8.25, 8.5 space. But that said, it sounds like there's some really cool stuff coming ahead later in the game, so that may push me up a little bit.
Right.
For me, I mean, there are definitely the clear-cut pros and cons. And when there's a game like this where I'm contemplating it, one of the telltale things for me of how entrenched I am in the experience is when I think about it when I'm not playing the game and when I'm excited to go home and play it. And this definitely fits in that category for me right now. I mean, this is a game that I can't wait to go home and convince my girlfriend this is for work, even though we're doing this podcast right now, and go back and play it. It's one of those games where I'm really excited about it and I'm enjoying every moment of it. So I would probably be in the 9s right now, even though I have the same problem as Miller does with the interrogation.
And it's been, a week since you played it, Matt?
Yeah.
What are your feelings? Do you want to go back and check it out again? Were there cases that you finished? I've run into this where, oh man, I should have done that better. Does it have that replay value, or is
I don't know how
a
much,
one-time through kind of thing?
I think it's, there's definitely aspects of few cases, maybe a handful, like 3 or 4 that I wish I could have over, because I know I botched, like you said, really botched an interview or a investigation. That being said, with just how I know it's like 20 hours, and whether I want to like spend the 8 hours to get back to the case that I want to see like another.
Well, can't you? Isn't there a case file you can go back to?
Oh yeah, you're right. I might do that. But as far as like playing the whole game over, I don't know if I would, just because once you see what happens at the end and the resolution, and I've talked to Rockstar, there's not like alternate endings or anything like that. I don't think I would play it again. That said, I really enjoyed my time with it, and it's one of those games where usually doing what we do, we want to think, well, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, and you read a review. Say if I like a game we talked about last week, like if I was like, Brink is better than Modern Warfare 2, and you'd be like, no, it's not. It doesn't have pre-game lobbies. It's single player is just bots. It's screwed up this. It's screwed up that. And Modern Warfare is a great single player, and it has all the it's like there's things you could say just to be factually right.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's like if somebody says I was really super like A+ compelled by the conversations and investigating, and I loved it, I can't say they're wrong. If somebody said this game's like a 7 out of 10, I thought it was really slow and really boring. I mean, are they wrong? You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to respect a certain level of like effort and production values and things like that about the game. But I can't really tell other people that their impressions of this game, because it's just doing something different. There's not really good apples to apples comparisons with directly with other games. So I mean, the one thing about Rockstar is that their games are always worth. And they're always worth playing. They're always worth talking about. They're always an event, I think. And
yeah, even if you don't like the open world games and stuff like that, this game's doing so many different things that I think it's a game everybody should check out. It's one of those yearly releases that it is a must play for everyone.
You can play this game as if it's not open world at all. You can skip the driving and go straight from case to case. You choose to opt out of that experience.
And you
So-
mentioned your girlfriend. It might be a good game actually to play, with your significant other or like a friend that's not a total gamer, because it kind of in a way is just like a cool like noir movie that you sort of interact with, and I think it might be cool in that respect.
Yeah, you could
just to,
take a
like-
moment and discuss, like, is this person lying?
Yeah,
Is she
and-
telling the truth?
Or you could even go in and like at a party, break out one case, and like go
Right.
through that case and ask your friends, okay, what should I say here? I think there's something to be said for it being one of those games that you could really evangelize video games and the new directions that they're going.
Absolutely. So
Well,
yeah,
I think that's going to do it for our look at LA Noire here. Thanks for joining me, guys.
yeah. Thanks for hosting.
We'll be back after a quick music break for segment 2, which is Madden NFL. All right, welcome back. For segment 2, we're going to be talking about a sport that many people love, but a league that no longer exists. It's dead. It'll never come back. We're talking about
It's
the NFL
official. You heard it here first.
and Madden NFL football. That was Matthew Cotto.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by Matt Burtz.
Hey.
So there might not be football this year, yet we're going to have a Madden game regardless, right?
That's right.
So what makes this year's game so special? What's the big deal with this one?
Well, in my mind, one of the big things that they're doing is they're trying to fix up some of what we call the legacy issues. And that includes magnet tackles and catches, and some of that info's been out there, and we've talked about that before. Just clearing up some of the gameplay. And another big one is just some of the changes they're trying to make to the franchise mode. That was kind of left dormant last year, and so they're trying to go back and address that.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
when I
like-
proof your stories and all that stuff, and every year I'm reading about Madden, it seems like they're fixing tackles, they're doing all this stuff. Are they really fixing tackles, or are they just doing like another update on it? Is this the year it's going to be?
Well, here's the thing that I think is different this year. The past couple of years, they keep trying to. When we're in meetings with them, they say, "Well, the hardcore people actually play NCAA football." Madden reaches this way more casual audience, so they've been trying to dumb down the game in all these different ways for the past couple of years. This year, I think they finally realized the fan base they're angry, they're hostile. I mean, if you read the forums, these people they take it seriously and they take it personally. This year, they're finally giving those people what they want. They're going back. They're trying to renovate the franchise mode, renovate superstar mode, get rid of the things like Kato mentioned, that the moments that kind of take you out of the football experience for Madden, that makes it, you realize it's a video game when you see the ball warp into a guy's hand. They're trying to make it more appealing to the hardcore fan, which why wouldn't you? I mean,
Yeah, they're
millions
the
of
ones
people-
who've been here every year
Yeah,
to play
and
the game.
It's not. I mean, you can say they're casual gamers, maybe, but football fans are football fans. Millions of people play fantasy football. They obsess about this stuff. I think 26 million people watched the rookies that just got drafted run in their shorts for the combine. It's like people love the sport, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be trying to cater to that.
Right.
And Ryder, I'd say one of the things kind of differentiating, like you're saying, what's different about this year and kind of previous changes, I think in the past couple of years, they've added things to, let's say, like the running game and the tackling that was good and beneficial, but it wasn't necessarily addressing like specific issues that they'd had in past years. And I think this year they're trying to address specific things instead of, while last year's locomotion was great and I, like that it's been added, it wasn't the same as, hey, what are you going to do about, magnet catches or whatever. It was just adding layers of things instead of going back and changing existing foundation.
Yeah, that's kind of when you do a review of a game like this, you have to play it a ton. We play through multiple seasons, and when you get to that point where the kind of the varnish wears off for that new feature, you're back stuck with all that stuff that used to be
Right.
broken. So hopefully they're going to fix some stuff this year that has been plaguing the game for a long time.
And one of the controversies I was involved with last year was long snappers not being in the game, a key position that's been in football since its inception, right? Are they adding these guys this year?
Well, their position has been there, but it's just a matter of there wasn't a large enough roster to accommodate like some of your, let's say, just as skilled, but maybe just not as prominent spot players like long snappers. Now they've got a 75-man roster, which means, I'm not saying Colin Loeffler is going to be in the game, but there is now the roster sort of accommodation where if you wanted, if he was in the game, you could have him, keep him on the roster as a total, succinct, separate position instead of having to double up your center. So that's one of the new additions, and they're going to also include like rookie cut down days during preseason. So you start with a 75-man roster, and as training camp and preseason goes on, you cut down to get to your actual regular season roster. It's 52 players, I believe. So that's kind of new in the game. Unfortunately, there's not practice squads, which was something what a lot of people wanted, but I guess it's getting
Why
there.
would you want practice squads? Those are like the
Developmental players. So those are guys
Gotcha.
that they're not good enough to be playing right now, but if you have an injury, it's great to have a guy there that can step up and you don't have to sign a guy off the street. They learn the system, and if you have mentor players, like one of the new things this year is they have, it's the new old thing, they have player roles back. So if you have a player who's a mentor on your team, he's going to help players around him get better. That would be really nice to have for that kind of stuff.
Kind of on that topic, I know, Bertz, you were kind of researching some of the old features that Madden had in previous franchises but had dropped out. I mean, are there things that you've seen, that older features that you are coming back that you think are good additions this year?
I don't know that there's too many. The thing I'm most excited about is they're fixing free agency. I hate the system. It's the first day of free agency in the NFL it's crazy. It's a whirlwind. There's people getting flown all over the country, wined and dined, and there was nothing to kind of mimic that. And the way they're doing it this year is kind of an eBay bidding system that happens in real time. So at least there's going to be that frantic nature of like, oh, this team is actually bidding more than me. Is that more than I want to spend? Do I have to go look for a secondary option, or am I just going to blow all my cash on this guy? So hopefully that's going to turn out and kind of impart some of that enthusiasm.
Yeah, that's always been a thing in all sports games. I play a lot of baseball games that has been just behind the scenes kind of numbers. Like baseball has the winter meetings. That's where all the GMs get together. The big players come rolling through the door, and everybody's like, where's he going to go? It'd be nice to see more of that in these games. And this sounds like the eBay system seems like it's going in the right direction, but we still need to get more of that drama, like you're saying, guys getting flown around and stuff like that into these games. That's such a huge part. Like you're saying, football fans watch people play in their shorts and run the 4-4, whatever that stuff is. They need to get that stuff into the game more, opposed to just new logic and stuff like that. And on top of the free agents and the stuff you guys have talked about, is there anything new to like the gameplay outside of like players making better catches or not making the catches? Are there any new mechanics or anything?
Well,
like
they
that?
added back a tackle button, right?
Yeah.
There is a tackle button now. For the past couple of years, most people just focus on the hit stick, try to make that big hit. And if you miss, then you got to hope some guys are there to clean up your mess. Or you could just run into the guy. And now there's a physical tackle button, which...
So that's just like a wrap-up button? That's not like
Yeah.
Yeah,
laying
I
them
think
out?
that's like a form tackle.
I think
Gotcha.
part of the thing with the tackle button is that with the new tackling system, it's basically like it's not going to trigger a tackle animation until two players make contact, and that's to try to avoid some of the suction tackles and things like that. So I guess to try to help you maybe perhaps get used to that timing, because like Bertz was saying, if you don't want to just go and dive in there, and then that the animation now isn't going to run until you actually physically make contact with the player. I personally see the tackle button as kind of a way to kind of break down and then prepare for a wrap tackle. And you do have to get that little timing of, if you do it too early, you may whiff or, just get caught standing there. And if you do it too late, obviously it's too late. So it's kind of a way maybe to kind of prep your player and just try to prepare for a textbook wrap tackle that's not, like diving head first or whatever.
Yeah. And the other, this isn't like pure gameplay mechanic, but it's something that every player uses in the game. They're adding customized playbooks back in. Another old Madden feature that people love that for some reason was lost in the changeover to this generation.
Yeah,
And
why? I mean, if the system worked and it worked well, why would they just delete it moving forward?
I mean, I don't know the behind the scenes of what happened when they carried over, but that first game that came out for the 360, that travesty, that was a disaster. It was barely playable. It really felt like they're trying to go for this whole different feel of like being on the field, like breathing that cold air right alongside the players when you're playing at Lambeau Field. And fans just didn't respond to it. You didn't have announcers or anything. And they were trying to rebuild something new from the ground up. And when they moved to the new technology, they just didn't have the time to port all that stuff.
And for them, every time we talk to them, it's all about, anything you talk about, like maybe you should do this or, is this coming back or whatever. They always talk about it in terms of development man hours. We've only got so many. And, some problems, I've asked them about some features and they'll say, you know what, that problem is actually will take longer to implement than you'd think, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think to them, it's always a manner of, because obviously it's a year-to-year franchise, just managing their time and resources. So I always feel it's a trade-off between we're giving you this, that's kind of at the expense of this other thing, which we didn't have time to work on.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really excited about this year, actually, because it doesn't seem, for years it seems like they're adding this marketing bullcrap just to make it more appealing to Joe Schmo who doesn't even know what a third down is, and like there is no backtrack, no like rewind button, no Madden AI virtual reality trainer system. They're focusing on the stuff that football fans want to see, and it's like about goddamn time.
Now, with something like the playbooks, like you guys are talking about, players have a wider chance of exploiting the system, maybe finding a play that works every time or a cross pattern. Do they allow these in the competitions or in online play even? Or is that just something you can kind of do on your own in a single-player experience?
I found there's been less and less cheesing as this generation has gone on. You don't see that money play as much anymore. It's more just the versatility, because if you're stuck, like if you're the Vikings and you have Brad Childress's boring playbook and you want something from the Giants playbook and you want something from the Broncos playbook, now you're just allowing the player to do whatever he wants and build that ultimate offense that he wants to run. So I think that's the draw. I'm sure there are still plays. Like last year, people exploited the flats a lot because of the way that the zone coverages work. They drop off really far. So you could hit guys underneath that were super fast, and that was an exploit. They've changed the zone logic. They're actually trying to change how players react as opposed to like nerfing a play. So at least they're trying to attack the root.
Interesting. And then you guys were talking about player mentors. I don't follow the NFL as closely as you do, but I did see some news that like Brett Favre might be coming back in like a coaching role, like playing Mr. Miyagi to some rookie. Is that kind of what you're talking about, or is it mentors are like more like the head running back on your team, fostering the other guys?
It's an
RPG
kind of attribute skill boost kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think each player is eligible for multiple roles, but the computer will actually pick which two roles they'll take. Like one of the instances might be Tom Brady is, might be I'm just making this up, but might be like great in the fourth quarter and might be, really good in the playoffs. And so even the roles that a player is available for is determined by their stats and their ratings.
Yeah, it's kind of dumb. I don't like that.
Yeah, but it's kind of nice where there's actually things, bonuses that somebody will give to you. At the same time, it's not totally exploitable. Like if you take your backup, who's just a kid, and you give him, let's say you throw some out, outrageous season with him, he's not instantly, or let's say it's like an really old QB, let's say like John Kitna, he's not instantly going to become a franchise QB, a player role just because he threw for like 3,000 yards one season. It'll sort of balance it out kind of logically in that sense, but in the bad sense is you can't pick which roles you want, even though I think there's...
why can't you have more than two roles? FIFA soccer has... You can have a player who's an engine, who's an aerial threat, who's like 5 or 6 different things, and you're like, well, this guy's awesome, and franchise players should be like that. They don't just bring 1 or 2 things to the table.
Yeah, there's 20 available, but they only pick 2, so it's good and bad,
Interesting. And how many... I play a baseball game, and a season will take me getting through a season will take me basically as long as the baseball season itself. You have 162 games, 30 preseason games, then the playoffs. How many seasons do you guys go through when you play Madden? And do you get to see that depth then where you have the rookies coming up, or is it more of something you simulate?
I'm right now in my 6th Madden season, I think. I'm trying to find my characters in the game somewhere, and I haven't got the draft class.
Kato's in it as well, right?
Yeah, Kato's a D-back. I'm a running back. I can't find my guy. So I just keep playing through. And one of the things that I like about the new game, from what it sounds like, is they're fixing the rookie scouting, which is super exploitable in Madden, which kind of deflates the franchise experience right now. Because you see the player which potential rating. You see the potential rating right off the bat when you're analyzing these guys. So well, if I'm in the 5th round and I have the choice between this schlub and this schlub, this guy's got a high potential, so he might end up actually being really good. So
Gotcha.
you just draft a team full of, I mean, I don't have anybody that's rated 80 or less than 80 on my team right now in my 6th year. And I just let guys go because I'm like, well, I'll just get a new guy this year. You know, you don't have to make those tough choices. So this year they're fixing it. You're going to get stuff revealed through like the combine, through pro workout days, through the regular season scouting. So there's going to be more of a, I think, an algebra to it, which I'm looking forward to.
How do they do the combine? Is that just all stats again, numbers, or is it?
I think so.
Does it have a visual component?
I don't think so. The sense I get is that like as each scouting opportunity goes by, whether it's regular season or pro days or combines, as you get closer to the draft, you'll get fewer and fewer opportunities to scout fewer players. So it's by the time you get to someone's pro day, you know, the pro day sort of schedule, 3-4 weeks or whatever, you're really only looking at 4 or 5 guys that you really, really like. So I don't think that, I think it's just more of like I said, they're sort of scouting windows more than they are actual parts of the game.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to mention just about new players is, along with sort of the roles, there's also like player performance. So players will go on, during the season, they'll go on like hot and cold streaks. But one of the things, you're talking about rookies and sort of like, what's the impetus to keep a young guy on if you know you can keep somebody else on? One of the other things they're doing is they're making, there might be like inconsistent players and other sort of, even like, fumble-prone guys or whatever. Some of those sort of negative characteristics may actually improve with age as the players mature. So I think they're also trying to add in some impetus to kind of, scout your guys effectively, get to know them, get to know what kind of players there are, and maybe keep and retain more players from year to year, which is something that we see more in real life.
Yeah, one of the things, the way that scouting carries over, if you don't fully scout a guy, you draft late and you just take a gamble. Maybe you got a few tidbits and you feel comfortable enough. Okay, he's fast enough, he's strong enough. Once you get him on your team, in previous games, once you sign him, you know his rating right off the bat. So you know whether it was a win-loss proposition right away. You do not reveal all their ratings in this game.
Oh, that's cool.
Even when you're in preseason, which makes the cut days tough because if you're playing with this guy and you're like, well, I think he's good, but right now I don't have all his ratings in. I can't see the full picture. If you cut that guy, some other team might pick him up and he might end up being a
It's almost getting to the point where you're going to have to start studying footage, like, checking out film on these guys. Like, how does he play? And that would be cool if they had, like we were just talking about, some of that drama where maybe you're playing a game and then during halftime they have clips of some college guys and, adding to like, okay, this is the number one guy that's targeted.
Well, even
let's
like
see what he's about.
The old infamous NFL 2K5, they used to do those little Berman, Mel Kiper, ESPN scouting shows. And you just would see, even if it was just a name, you'd see who was on, Mel's big board and stuff like that, just to add a little bit of that drama. So yeah, that would be nice.
That's one thing they're actually cutting this year. That they've had a week wrap-up show called The Extra Point,
right?
Which was way half-baked. I mean, it was terrible. It would two teams would be facing off, and whichever team won would get in the playoffs. But they wouldn't talk about that game. They'd talk about a game between a 2-13 team and like another schlub team that's going to be fighting for the top draft pick. It just didn't work. But rather than fix it, they got rid of it.
They just cut it completely.
That's one of those things. I mean, 2K5 did it so well, and
it's amazing.
The legend grows.
We keep going back to that game. Anything else that's worth noting? Graphics. I know there was some stuff in NCAA, kind of the sister game to this, that it's making leaps and bounds forward. Are we seeing that stuff in Madden?
I think, little parts, players will have flak jackets, some other sort of more realistic equipment components. They've got the 3D grass.
Which was how they led off their...
Wait, football, they wear flak jackets on the field?
Yeah, a lot of the QBs do. You can see them. Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea. I thought it was just padding.
That's hardcore stuff when you're getting a defensive tackle planted in your chest. So a lot of that stuff is equipment. They have a new lighting thing that they're doing, which I got to be honest with you, like describing it's a little confusing. I'm not even sure I understand it 100%. But
the high dynamic range.
Yeah,
lighting.
It's about.
It just makes it look more like a TV broadcast.
Yeah, it's different sort of lighting exposures at different times to sort of make. Yeah.
So
make
the depth of field,
realistic.
it really focuses on who's in front as opposed to what's going on in the back, having it all be the same kind of focus.
That can be risky. Some games do it really well, but when they do it wrong, it looks terrible.
Well, they have a really good guy. I mean, he's only been on the team a couple of years, Mike Young, and the presentation and the way that things are lit and everything, it's gotten much better. You can tell that guy has a pretty good grasp of what he's doing.
Cool. Anything else that's worth noting in this one?
They're also trying to do some more improvements to Superstar mode, which has basically been left untouched a couple years. It doesn't sound like it's got some of the flashy like HUD apartment mansion stuff that maybe we were hoping for, but they're certainly trying to change the AI play calling. You can now demand a trade. There's career stat tracking, and perhaps most interestingly, how your performance in practices and games earns you XP points, and then you can kind of spend those to improve your player. So that, adds a little light RPG thing. Again, cool. I think most people would like kind of more that glitz of like, I'm buying a mansion, or like, the old 2K crib kind
We're
of thing.
We're back to it again.
There it is. But, the RPG feature's kind of cool. And at a minimum, though, I think people just want better AI play calling. So if, you're running back, star running back, you're not getting caught up in, bad offensive play calling and on third down and
no
stuff
more
like
draws
that.
on third and eight. There's always draws.
Now, you guys sound pretty happy with the direction they're taking here. It kind of seems like it's going for the hardcore players. After you played last year's game, what were some of the things that you wanted to see, and are those things in this? Have they been addressed in different ways?
I mean, for me, it was those two things. It was improve franchise and fix the legacy stuff. And of course, we don't know. With the legacy stuff, with the tackles, that's like Bertz was saying. We're going to have to, go through this game, for hours and hours and hours to really get a feel for if it's been fixed. But on the face of it, those were my two big issues, and I'm glad that they're addressing them.
My other big one is online franchise, which last year when we were talking to them, they introduced it 2 years ago. And apparently not a lot of people, the telemetry data said it's not really a destination mode for a lot of people. But to us, that's because it wasn't a full-fledged thing. You didn't have free agency. It was missing a lot of the things that franchise modes need to have to make it fun and competitive with your buddies. So that was kind of a chicken and the egg argument. They're like, well, we didn't do much. I really hope they do something this year because I still think online is the way of the future for these games. The more you can get communities built around each other and you have a bunch of people playing long term, like NCAA football did last year with their Facebook type blog format that a lot of people, Todd Howard from Bethesda, he says they still have a league going. They play all the time. They have one of their guys on the team that updates all the blog info and writes the taunt posts, and like it's that's what makes it more immersive.
He's the last guy I would expect to be playing that.
Yeah, Todd Howard likes sports, man.
That's crazy. It's got to be a different Todd Howard. Same area code.
Same area code, same office, same desk.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Game Informer Show. Obviously, we'll be back next week. I will not be hosting. Matt Helgeson will be back in his normal role.
What?
Yes. Sorry, guys. I know it was so much better.
For a new contract or something.
He might be, but we'll see.
To CBS.
But that does it for us, and thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.